Our guest speaker this evening is aviation historian Raymond Fordyce, who honors his father, who was a captain in a World War II 8th Air Force B-17 bomber group. Ray is a veteran. He went to West Point. He's a pilot and eventually retired from a management career with IBM and later Siemens, registering 3 U.S. patents. He's an event speaker on military and aviation-related topics. He's done this around the country, and he's the author of numerous air war articles and essays. He was once a guest at a German World War II fighter group reunion in Spain and was a historical and technical advisor to the recent Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks TV series, Masters of the Air. He currently serves as chairman of the Cobb County Civil Service Board and has been re-elected to a third 4-year term last year. He also has been a docent at the Aviation History and Technology Center in Marietta for more than 7 years. And we were fortunate enough to have him a few months ago speaking to our group and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think you're going to enjoy him as well as the photos that you're going to be seeing. In the interest of time, we'd like for you to hold any questions or comments to the end. And since he has an engineering background, everything is clockwork. So he told me when his slideshow started, okay, you got 5 minutes, and then you're on, and then I'm on. So I can assure you we will be finished and out of here by 8 o'clock. Thank you, Ray.
40 million. 40 million. That's a very big number. 40 million is such a big number that it is more than the population of California or Canada, of New York, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania combined, of Sweden, Holland, and Belgium combined. 40 million. 40 million represents the number of casualties in the Great War, which we also call the First World War. The Great War casualties, of those 40 million, half were deaths. And of that 20 some odd million, nearly half were civilian. And this is really interesting. Of the 10 to 12 million military deaths, only 2/3 were in battle. 1/3 was in by disease. Something that we take for granted today. We take vaccines, inoculations, preventatives, and cures. Typhus fever. Typhus fever afflicted troops by the hundreds of thousands. Had an 80% mortality rate. Anybody ever heard of trench foot? I hadn't. Trench foot, you guys have. Trench foot occurs when a foot is immersed in water and bound in something tight, like leather, for a period of time. These guys were fighting in and out of trenches. Rain would come, sometimes for days. The trenches would fill with water. Men would be standing in trenches, huddled in trenches, in ankle-deep water, makeshift latrines running into them. Highly unsanitary. Trench foot, if not properly addressed quickly, turns to gangrene. And the cure for gangrene at the time was amputation. Spanish flu. What a name. During the war, Spanish flu was rampant. Actually, 1/3 of the world's population got Spanish flu. 50 to 100 million people died from Spanish flu. During the war, both sides had it. All the troops, it was very common among the troops. The belligerent parties all censored their news. the Germans were not about to announce, a lot of our guys are really sick and they can't fight, because the British would attack them, so they thought. But the British were doing the same thing, and so were the Serbs, so were the Austro-Hungarians, so were the British and the French. Spain was neutral. Spain published the news. They thought they were the only people that had this incredible disease. But that wasn't true. Spanish flu, the first recorded case in the world, was at Camp Funston in Kansas in April 18th to be exact, of 1918. Our troops got it first and spread it to the world. Spanish flu, indeed. And another 6 million people were missing. It was only after the war that Spain found out that they weren't the only ones. This was a war to end all wars. Well, how did this war start? Well, it's complicated. And is it more complicated maybe than a Rubik's Cube? More complicated maybe than the Kansas City Chiefs shifting pocket offense? Well, actually, yes, much more complicated. You see, during the Great War, there were alliances, lots and lots of alliances. The genesis of it really was that exactly 1 month earlier than the war formally began. On the 28th of June, 1914, in Sarajevo, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Crown Prince Ferdinand, was assassinated by a Serbian fanatic. And Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia. Serbia said, we didn't have anything to do with it. Nonetheless, a month after it happened, they declared war on Serbia. The problem is, Serbia had an alliance with Russia. Russia is coming into the war on Serbia's side. Well, Austria-Hungary has an alliance with Germany that said if Russia is ever at war with you, we will fight Russia. So now Germany and Austria-Hungary are fighting Serbia and Russia. But wait, it gets worse. Russia had an alliance with France. They both bordered Germany. And the deal was, if either of you guys ever are fighting Germany, the other one will come to the rescue. So France gets in the war. Now the Germans feared having a two-front war. So they foresaw the possibility of it happening. So in the early 1910s, a German general began to develop a plan called the von Schlieffen Plan. And it basically, if we're fighting just France, we'll use it. If we're fighting France and Russia, which in this case it was true, what they would do would attempt to knock France out of the war really quickly because France had a large standing army. Russia, they knew, would take a couple months to get organized. So they're going to go after France first. But France had a great army, and they had a lot of guys and a lot of materiel right on the border with Germany. So they decided, the von Schlieffen Plan said, the way to beat the French army is attack them from the rear. And the way that we do that is we go through Belgium. And so they went through Belgium with the intent of surrounding the French army and attacking them from the rear. The only problem with that was that Belgium had an alliance with England. So England gets in the war. Guess who England had an alliance with? You won't believe it. Japan. Japan is now in the war on the Allies' side. And they quickly took advantage of this because they went after some concessions, the German concessions in China, but also in 3 areas of the Pacific: the Caroline Islands, the Marshall Islands, and the Marianas. During the Second World War, all 3 of those areas, Tarawa, if you prefer, the first pitched battle between the United States and an entrenched Japanese island force. Truk Lagoon, where the U.S. Navy sank 250 Japanese ships. And the Marianas, where the Battle of the Philippine Sea took place. And it became known because we shot down 500 Japanese aircraft at the loss of just a few dozen of our own. It became known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. So all kinds, actually 32 countries were identified as formal belligerents, and more than 100 countries, protectorates, and possessions were involved in the war in one way or another. It was all over the world. The major battles, of course, were in France and Belgium, but not in Germany. Interesting. America got in. Now, America had been very protectionist and was not going to get involved in European affairs. But things began to change with the sinking of the Lusitania in late 1950. The unrestricted German warfare. Germany was courting Mexico to become an ally with the intent of keeping America out of the war. We also had $7 billion in loans. That was a lot of money then. It's a lot more than it is today, of course, to allies. And we officially entered the war finally on the 6th of April, 1917. We mobilized a little under 5 million men. First boots on the ground were in June of 17, and under his command, General Pershing, John Pershing's command, the American Expeditionary Force, he had 2 million men and women under his command 1 year later. About 1 million of them were boots on the ground in France. Enter Alvin Cullen York, a bona fide American hero who was a conscientious objector. Alvin York is regarded internationally as being World War I's greatest civilian soldiers. He had petitioned for religious deferment. He was very strictly followed his religion, very fundamentalist religion. He did not believe in violence, and he certainly did not believe in war. He was denied that, he appealed it, he was denied the appeal. He joined the Army's 82nd Division, arriving in France in May of 1918, rank of private. By October, because of battlefield attrition, he was a private first class, but an acting corporal in his squad. He was the second most senior man in his squad. Well, on the 18th of October, he had been given orders along with 16 other men to go out and tear up a rail line to prevent Germans from being able to move materiel, supplies, etc., reinforcements. They got lost. And they inadvertently went behind German lines and came under heavy machine gun fire. The machine gun fire promptly killed 9 of the men and badly wounded 3 others. There were only 5 of them left. So, Corporal York ordered those men, the other 4 men, cover me. They started just trying to shoot at the machine gun nest. York crawled up the hill and single-handedly killed everybody in the machine gun nest. When he took out the machine gun crew, the German commander came and stood up and emptied his pistol at him at short range. Pistols, as many of you know, are accurate only for a fairly short distance. He missed. York then demanded his surrender and got it, along with 135 prisoners. He had a large force behind him. York promptly marched them back to his headquarters, and a general was there visiting his commander. He came and saw all these German guys with this one guy behind them, and the general said, "My commander, your commander says he sent you out to tear up a rail line, and you come back with the whole German army." The background you've seen was actually a painting commissioned in 1919, done by Frank Schooner, and it today hangs in the Tennessee State House of Sergeant York in that particular episode. He received more than 50 medals, citations, and awards from a large variety of countries, including from America, among others, the Medal of Honor. There is, in 1941, a motion picture, Sergeant York, starring Gary Cooper. It was nominated for 9 Academy Awards, won 2 of them, including Best Actor for Gary Cooper. But now back to the war. On 11 November 1918, shortly after 5 a.m., at the Germans' request, the Germans requested to begin discussions about an armistice. They met in a train car in a forest outside Paris. And they began signing this. This was an armistice as a ceasefire, but it was an armistice in name only. It was a surrender by the Germans. And by 5:45, the signing is complete. And all of the officers, representatives stood up and said, okay, we'll tell everybody the war's over. The Allied commander, the Supreme Allied commander, was General Ferdinand Foch. And he fancied himself a romantic, poetic kind of guy. And he said, no. That doesn't have the right symmetry. We're going to stop the war at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. So, 1100 hours, 11 a.m. is when the war is going to stop. Now, commanders on both sides instructed their troops, hey guys, war's over. Don't do anything radical here, okay? Just stand down, settle down. But if you did otherwise, particularly American commanders, it turns out that some of them had been there just a few weeks, and they wanted to get their medals, they wanted to get their glory. So some American commanders sent their men over the top, meaning out of the trenches and go get the bad guys. Which brings us to the tragic story of Henry Nicholas John Gunther. He's a very interesting guy. He's a first-generation German American. Parents were immigrants from Germany. And he lived in Germantown. Now, that's a section in Baltimore. It's there today. Many cities around the country, particularly in the Northeast and a few on the West Coast, have ethnic enclaves, Chinatown and Little Italy in New York, etc. Germantown in Baltimore. It wasn't a good place to say you were from, because we looked down typically on ethnic groups from foreign countries or with that background. And particularly since we were at war with Germany. But he was an ambitious guy, and he managed to land a terrific job at the First National Bank of Baltimore, which was not in Germantown. And so he has this great new job. He wasn't going to enlist because he felt they didn't want him. He was a German American. He got engaged to a lovely young woman, and then he got drafted. Without hesitation, he went off to war and quickly rose through the ranks. He was a private, then a private first class, then a corporal, and then he was a sergeant. One day at the front, he got a letter from his cousin back in Germantown that said, I'm thinking of enlisting, do you have any advice for me? And he sent back a letter and said, whatever you do, don't enlist. If they draft you, do your duty. But the conditions here are horrendous. They are terrible. Men are dying before they ever even see battle. Conditions are terrible. Don't do it. Some outgoing male was censored. His happened to be one of the ones picked. 48 hours later, he was stripped of his rank, kicked out of his company, and sent straight to the front, straight to a commander that was determined to go get his medals. And so it was that when the word got back to Germantown, his bank said, "You're not coming back to work here. You're disgraced." His fiancée broke off the divorce. He's a devastated man. And so it was that Private Henry Gunther of the 79th 313th Infantry Regiment attacked a German roadblock. And as he is running toward the roadblock, the Germans, this is on the 11th of November in the morning, the Germans are standing up and out, out. And one guy broke in English, "Stop, war over, war over." On he came. And finally, German machine gun fire cut him down at 10:59 a.m., 1 minute before the ceasefire. He was the last man killed of any combatant in the First World War. His body was exhumed and brought back. They posthumously promoted him to Sergeant +1, a higher rank than he'd previously held. They buried him in Germantown. You can see his grave today. He was decorated by France, England, and America. During that brief period, a little over 5 hours, 3,000 more were killed. Some poetic symmetry. Of the 20 million deaths, this is how it kind of broke down. The Central Powers had low single-digit percentages of the country's population, not of the number of military men they had. Okay? 4% of Austria-Hungary's population died in the war. The Ottoman Empire lost more than 15%. On the Allied side of the Triple Entente, the Americans, we had 120,000 men that we lost, or 1/10 of 1%. The UK, 2.2%. France had more, 4.4%, but it continues to get worse. Romania had nearly 9% of their population. And the Serbians lost more than a quarter of their population in that war. 10 to 11 million, 10 to 12 million, excuse me, military deaths. Which brings us to another very interesting guy, John McCrae. John McCrae was the chief surgeon of the Canadian Army, which was, of course, part of the UK, and so he was overseas. He re-enlisted at age 41. He had actually been an artillery officer and served with the UK, the Commonwealth forces in South Africa in 1899. He came back, went to medical school, became a highly skilled surgeon. He was so skilled as a surgeon, he became the chief surgeon at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Montreal, the best hospital in Canada, and also the chief surgeon at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. He was chief surgeon of the Canadian Army. Following the Second Battle of Ypres in northeastern Belgium in April and May of 1915, he was out on the battlefield following a battle, trying to help anyone that was wounded and get them back to some sort of makeshift triage. And he came across his lifelong best friend, who was a captain, lying dead. It caused him to set down his thoughts in a poem. And the poem became symbolically emblematic, really, of the First World War. It was called In Flanders Fields. In Flanders Fields, The poppies blow between the crosses, row on row. We shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. Quickly, the poppy, like the lapel I'm wearing, given to me, became a symbol of the First World War and is today. The black stands for the death of those who died during that conflict. The red represents the sacrifice of those who served in that conflict. The green represents of the leaves and of the stem represents renewal and hope for the future. If you go to any cemetery in France or England today, it's a World War I cemetery, every one has poppies growing. This began as Armistice Day. We celebrated it here. It was informally celebrated in 1919 because they were celebrating it in Europe, the first anniversary on 11 November. In 26, Congress said, let's start observing it. And then it became a national holiday in 38, and it was suspended, of course, during the Second World War. President Eisenhower changed the name in 1954 to celebrate and honor veterans from not only the First World War, but the Second World War, the Korean War. Congress in 68 made it the fourth Monday. Some of us remember it when it was that way. And in 1975, President Ford changed it back to where it belonged, where it is today. It's one of three holidays that honor veterans. The third Saturday in May, many of us forget to put a flag out that day. We should, as we're all now serving. Memorial Day for those who died, and Veterans Day, all veterans, past, present. What is Veterans Day? Well, we celebrate it as a holiday. And it's certain, some things are certain on Veterans Day. There are big sales. And you can honor veterans by going down and getting zero down and low APR financing on a new car. Great place. Gives free haircuts to veterans. And if you don't need a haircut, Mike Lindell will still sell you a pillow. Now, if you don't need a pillow, you need to call the Medicare hotline at 1-800-690-0812 and get all the benefits you deserve. And if you don't need any benefits, remember that Liberty Mutual customizes your car insurance so you only pay for what you need. Although Flo probably would disagree with all of that. We celebrate it as a holiday, and we say, Happy Veterans Day. Well, I am not here to wish you a happy Veterans Day. Veterans Day, properly, is a day to honor and commemorate the service of veterans. And today we honor those veterans from time immemorial in America. From the Minutemen of Concord Green in the War of 1812, the men in blue and the men in gray. The Rough Riders of San Juan Hill, the doughboys of the First World War. The GIs, the airmen, the sailors of the Second World War. Those men and women that froze or suffered from disease in Korea, Vietnam, and the Desert Wars. There are also women. These are Catholic nuns who were nurses with General Pershing in France in 1918. Women helped on the home front, traditionally. Some served in the military, some overseas. Some women ferried aircraft to our combat flyers. Some served close to the front in Korea and Vietnam. And today, some women are absolutely serving at the front. All of them are veterans. And some of them are in this room tonight. Veterans are needed because wars happen. And war is ugly, but it has toppled dictators, killed terrorists, stopped genocide, freed slaves, and ensured freedom, our freedom. Not all veterans fought in wars, but every veteran went through the joys of basic training. Which brings me to a book, We Were Soldiers Once and Young, by retired Lieutenant General Harold G. Moore. That's who they renamed Fort Benning for before they changed it back. And Joseph Galloway, who was a Pulitzer Prize-winning renowned journalist. It described the Battle of Ia Drang, which was the first pitched battle between American forces and North Vietnamese forces. Ironically, it commenced on the 11th of November, 1965. Lasted for a week. This is a picture of then Lieutenant Colonel Moore, and that's a picture of him at a 2010 reunion at West Point. He was a graduate of West Point, the class of 1945. And this is a picture of Joseph Galloway in Vietnam, as well as more recently, although he passed away in 2021. The Army had begun tentatively to embed journalists with some units. Galloway happened to be embedded with Colonel Moore, and he saw this battle. He is a very rare, and was a very rare individual. We're talking about a handful of people that have this honor. He is a civilian that received a military honor award and can wear a medal. During the Battle of Ia Drang, he observed a soldier, a medevac, that's a rescue helicopter, coming in to pick up wounded, and it's under fire. He observed a badly wounded soldier out there crawling, but was too badly wounded to get to the helicopter. Galloway put down his camera, ran out, picked him up, put him on the helicopter. This is a picture, excuse me, of Basil Plumlee, then and in 2010 at that same reunion. He was General Moore's guest. He did not go to West Point. Basil Plumlee is a Class A #1 top shelf stud. He passed away in 2017. But when he retired from the Army, he was Command Sergeant of the United States Army. He was the top-ranked, top-rated sergeant in the Army. He was airborne in World War II, and he volunteered to fly in the gliders that landed on the Cotentin Peninsula behind German lines on D-Day. 60% of the gliders were lost. He volunteered for it. He went to Korea and did jumps. He was airborne qualified. And he also served in Vietnam. He was Colonel Moore's aide. They were connected at the hips. Then, and in 2010, one other character, Basil Plumlee. Pardon me, the same character. In the movie, We Were Soldiers, Mel Gibson starred as Colonel Moore, and Sam Elliott played Basil Plumlee. He does a lot of pro bono for the military. amazing amount. He's a big guy. He's very soft-spoken. You've seen him in the ads on TV, you've seen him in movies, and so on. He told us at a reunion, this was the 2016 reunion, this is a picture of me with him. Go Army, beat Navy, by the way. He told, I'll give you a couple brief stories. Some of the stories he told us I won't be able to share, but he said, some of you know that some Hollywood actors are vertically challenged. Looking at you, Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Mel Gibson played Colonel Moore. And Sam said, you know, if you, in that movie, whenever you see us talking face to face, I assure you there was a very large box involved. Okay? The second thing he told us, and this is, you'll have to forgive me for telling you this, but it's memorable. The director, producers, took him down to Fort Benning. They wanted him to get a real military environment to see troops being trained. So they went down there and they went out to an obstacle course and they invited the actors, if you guys want to go try this obstacle course, you're welcome to do it. And several of the actors volunteered, including Sam Elliott. Now I'll describe the obstacle course. Picture, if you will, a berm. A berm is like a slanted pile of dirt and highly compacted rocks, dirt, that kind of thing, over there. And then starting a little bit, maybe 15 feet away from the berm, is a field of dirt, rocks, mud, and it goes for 40 or 50 yards. The guys are supposed to crawl down that and keep their rifle clean so they can use it. Oh, and by the way, there are stakes out there, 22 inches high, with very sharp barbed wire, so nobody's standing up. And so they start to crawl down. Some of the actors are crawling down, Sam Elliott included. And as they're crawling, they get about 10 or 20 yards in, machine guns start firing. Now they were firing blanks, but nonetheless, they're firing machine guns and they're crawling toward them. Sam Elliott said that, you know, when you get about 20 feet away from a couple machine guns firing, it's a real come to Jesus moment. And he said they got out and said, man. Then the commanding officer said, would you like to see our guys do it? And they said, sure, well, we can see them do it. So they started doing it. They started watching the other troops. But then one of the actors noticed, remember that berm? All these huge plumes were going up. They're firing live ammunition where the troops are going over. They're hearing the bullets whizzing over their head. He said a couple of the actors, forgive me, a couple of the actors needed a change of underwear after that exercise. It's better to put their lives on hold to serve their country. And they asked their families to share the sacrifice. Everyone lived the military life for the duration of their service, but some were on the front lines. Every one of them had a family or a loved one that they would much rather be with. And men aren't the only heroes. Women that served at or near the front, women who were giving heartbreaking tasks, women who stayed home and kept the home front alive. We've had 3 million that served in the war on terror. 5.5 million served in the Gulf Wars. 7 million in Vietnam, nearly 2 million in Korea, 16 million in World War II, and we are rapidly losing. And just a small handful of World War II veterans are still with us. Veterans endured long separations, and they endured hardships that most of us can't imagine. And their families. Mama, where's Daddy? Why doesn't he ever come home? 1 in 11 American adults is a veteran. It's an elite group. Veterans are proud to have served. Case in point, both Eisenhower and President Washington were more proud of their service than of their office. And if you don't believe that, read the obits. Service is front and center. And compare responsibilities. A CEO wrestling with profit and loss, P&L statements. Or a sergeant leading 10 or 12 men up a hill and trying to keep them alive under fire. No contest. And let us not forget those who have died in service to our country. Christian, Jew, Muslim, Hindu, you name it, Americans. As Lincoln so eloquently said, they gave the last full measure of devotion. Let us also not forget Gold Star families, those families that they left behind. Never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Those of us who have long enjoyed such freedoms as we enjoy forget in time that men died to win them. In fact, 1,360,000 and counting had paid the last full measure of devotion. President Reagan so eloquently said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction, and veterans have ensured that freedom. Let us not forget. Some of you may know what this is. In 1963, American poet and songwriter Rob McCune, these will be my closing remarks, wrote a poem that he set to music. And it quickly became popular. It was recorded by a number of other artists, including Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, the Kingston Trio. A lot of us remember those artists. It was called, Doesn't Anybody Know My Name? I'm not going to sing, so settle down. A couple of verses. I've been away so long, fought a war that's come and gone. Doesn't anybody know my name? Fought that war across the sea, almost died to keep us free. Doesn't anybody know my name? Please tell me, if you can, what time do the trains roll in? 2:10, 6:18, 10:44. Doesn't anybody know my name? Well, we do know your name. Veteran. Because we know that heroes don't wear capes. They wear dog tags. That is all.